Hi everyone, it's Wednesday. I hope you're staying dry. The weather has been pretty crazy and brutal here today. And the days are getting so very dark, but that's winter. We're pretty lucky to live in places where we have all seasons. Tonight, we're gonna cover a topic that I actually get asked about a lot, and that's fences. Who has to pay for them? All right. So we're talking about your home that you already own, and there might be some repairs that need to be done to the fences next door. There might be you want to get a new fence. So we're going to cover about what the rules are and who has to pay for your fences with your neighbours. All right. So the law is very clear on this. So first up, you do have to go halves with your neighbours if you want to do some changes to the fences, but there's really strict rules around that. It's not automatic, and you really need to follow the rules to make sure that your neighbour contributes to the fences. Otherwise, you're going to get lugged with the bill all yourself. The number one rule when you want to repair your fence, put a new fence up, anything like that, is to actually have a chat to your neighbour. Don't go ahead and do anything until you've actually had a chat to your neighbour about what you want to do and see if you can come to an agreement. Okay? And if you do come to an agreement, it's really important that you actually put it in writing. And it's actually a really good idea that before you even go and see them, maybe go with a couple of quotes and say, hey, I think we should do this type of new fence. This is what it could cost. What are you thinking? All right? And it's much easier to start that conversation around fences coming from just a really nice casual place. But the most importantly, don't do anything at all to the fences until you have a chat to your neighbour. Now, neighbours do have to pay half the cost of fencing, but if you're deciding to upgrade the fence and go to a more expensive fence, or you simply want to replace the fence to make it look better and it's actually not in disrepair, then your neighbour doesn't actually have to pay for that. They only are required to pay what is necessary to have a sufficient dividing fence. So you really need to keep that in mind. All right, so let's say you have had a chat with your neighbour. They don't want to fix the fence. They don't want to agree to pay for it. There are certain steps then that you can take. First of all, hello everybody. I'd super recommend that perhaps you try mediation. You know, these are people you're going to be living next door to, so you definitely want to make sure it doesn't get too nasty. But if you can't get anywhere, there is options available to you. So the first thing you need to do is actually serve on your neighbour a fencing notice, giving clear indication what you want to do. Hi, my name's so-and-so, we need to do this to the fence, this is what I propose. And if they don't respond within a month or you still can't agree, then you can actually go to the local court and get a fencing order. But the number one thing is, if you have not given those notices, if you haven't had those chat with your neighbours, the court actually won't issue an order forcing it to be done. So you really need to have those conversations before you do anything about what you want done to the fence. And just bear in mind, fairness, they only have to contribute to have a fence that is sufficient. It doesn't have to be, if you want to have some fancy fence or pay for extra pool fencing or higher fencing, if it's more than sufficient, they don't have to contribute to it. So just be that in mind. Hi Amanda, we're talking about fencing and what you need to do with your neighbours if you need to get fences done. Now that's talking about if you already own your house and you want to make some changes to the fence. Now here's a little trip. If you've gone and bought vacant land, so you've bought some land and you're going to build your house on it, the rules can be slightly different because most developers, if they own the land next door, they actually have clauses in the contracts when you bought saying that you can't have them, they don't have to contribute to the cost of the fences, all right? So you need to be really careful when you're budgeting, when you want to build your home, finding out whether or not the people next door are the original developers or if it's been sold and who needs to contribute to the fences. So slightly different laws around when it's vacant land. But again, the number one thing is to have a chat to your neighbour, okay? Yes, they do have to contribute to half the fence, only if they're not the original developer and they've already contracted out of having to pay for it. So That's fully aware, everybody knows that, but they don't have to pay for anything more than what's considered a sufficient dividing fence. So what that means is if you want something fancy, if you want to upgrade the fence, then the additional cost is on you. And remember, you've got to live with these people. You really don't want to have some nasty conversation and get all nasty about the fences. But whatever you do, do not make any changes at all to the fence until you've followed that process. Otherwise, unfortunately, you can't get any compensation at all. All right? It's a really interesting topic that people, it causes a lot of issues with your neighbours. So the biggest thing is communication, be really open with each other, have those chats, and don't do a thing before you've come to an agreement. And when you do come to an agreement, even though it might be your mate next door that you always have the Friday night beers with, still put it in writing. Is this legit the most cause of discussion between them? It's not the most cause of discussion, but I would say it is something that I get a lot of phone calls about because people often don't know how to handle the situation. And fences aren't cheap. And, you know, sometimes people want to do something more lavish than what the neighbour wants to do. Or, you know, sometimes a neighbour just simply can't afford to do the fencing issues yet. So it's a little bit of a touchy subject. But at the end of the day, both neighbours have a responsibility to have a safe dividing fence, okay? And it's really important that if you follow the right steps, everybody can make sure that you pay half and that you're being fair with it. This and the height of the house behind you. That's a little bit different. Because when we're talking about fences, you have to pay half the fence no matter what. And it just goes around what's fair, whether or not someone's continuing, where when we're talking about the height of the house behind you, that's more a council issue and what's permitted there. It's not really an obligation, but it's a really good point because that's another one that you definitely don't want to have those awkward conversations with your neighbours. So just making it super clear, if you've got a fence that needs to be fixed at your property, first things first, don't do anything. Go and get some quotes just so you've got an idea how much it's going to cost and have a chat to your neighbour. They have to pay half if the fence is in disrepair, but remember they only have to pay half to have a satisfactory dividing fence. So if you're going for a much more expensive, then they have to agree for it, or you're going to have to pay their share and they're only contributing what it would have been if they replaced the fence, okay? So a little bit different for vacant land. You can get caught out sometimes because a lot of developers put clauses in their contract saying that they're not going to contribute to any fences. So just always check with your conveyancer when you're buying vacant land who has to pay for the fences if it's going to be yours. And the number one thing is if you're buying vacant land and any of the fences are already there, any fences that are already there before you bought the property, you don't have to pay for it all. All right, it's only fences that go in during your ownership. And that's a little trick that I have seen a few people get caught out on as well. All right, so fences, it can be a bit of an iffy topic for neighbours, but it's about being open, transparent, and having a chat about what's fair, what's reasonable, and just putting it all in writing. Even if it is your best mate next door, it'll just make it a lot easier to have those Friday night beers over the fence. And actually, what's the name of that guy over Tool Time who has the fence? You know, and is it, I can't remember. If someone remembers the name of the guy from Tool Time who always used to look over the fence and you could only see him from here down, drop his name in the comments because, I can't remember his name. That's going to bug me all day. Wilson! That's it. Thank you, Tanya. So as Wilson and Tim the Toolman Taylor, they would obviously talk about their fences. So another thing is this doesn't need to be a complicated legal process. There is so much free information available for you what to do on fences, which is all online on government websites, that you don't need to go spending legal advice to do this, okay? You can fix this yourself. You can make sure that it's done in an amicable way, but you just need to make sure that you follow a couple of crucial steps so no one gets their nose out of joint and your bank balance stays exactly where you need it to. So that is Wednesday night from me, Confessions of a Conveyancer. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you again next week.